Okay, today we're going to go through a Pacifik bottleless water cooler filter change. This is a process that should take only about 5 minutes. It'll take a little longer when I walk through it step by step, but once you get the hang of it, it won't take much time at all. So as the first step, I've actually turned the water off, and that's going to be pretty critical to keeping this job mess-free. The next thing I want to do is take off the top to the water cooler. And I'm just going to slide this down the water tubing. This is why it's a good idea to have plastic tubing and not copper. Okay, the next step is that you're going to want to disconnect the filter system from the top of the water cooler. And before I do that, I like to release the pressure in the system by draining some of the water out. This causes the float valves to open and basically releases the water line pressure that you might have with the valve closed. So it's always good practice. It does make removing the tubing from the fittings a little bit easier. Just from one faucet, the cold faucet is all that you need. That should be more than adequate. So I'm going to disconnect the tubing and back first from the filters. And to disconnect this tubing, we're going to push the collets in towards the fitting. A little bit difficult to get my clunky hands in here, but we got that one out. And then the next step will be to disconnect the water line. Now there could be a little bit of water in this line, so it's handy to have a bucket or something that you can just tuck that down into, and that'll keep any water from getting on your floor. So we have the filter system disconnected now, and this black tape, which was originally provided to prevent it from shifting or coming loose during transit, that can be removed. Doesn't need to be replaced. It's really only for transit purposes. And then we're just going to unsnap the filter system. Okay, we have our old filtration system here, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up here is because in our new filtration system we have one long piece of tubing, and that's because there's a couple different variations to how this filtration system applies to different coolers, and so you will need to just cut the right size pieces. We're not going to need this bag, but we may put our old filtration system in it. We have instructions, okay? You'll need those if you're not totally familiar with how to do that. One long piece of tubing and a number of connectors. So the first thing you'll see is that we have two connectors on the bottom with this short piece of tubing in it. This is the piece of tubing that goes around to the back that fills the actual water cooler with water. And we're just going to make sure we get approximately the same length tubing. We normally use tubing cutter to cut tubing, but it's just as easy with an X-Acto knife. And it doesn't have to be exact, but if you're going to err on the side of making it a little bit longer. It's better to reach and have a little excess than not to reach. So we just try and cut that nice and straight, nice and round, so that it's not crushed. So sharp blade is definitely helpful for that purpose. So this will be our out tubing. And then we're going to need a little piece to go across the top, just like this. This is a pretty short piece of tubing. I'm going to take it out so we can get a similar size. And just about there. And we'll put it on my little piece of wood here. And cut through that. This is food grade, pressure rated tubing, so it's not going to cut like butter, but it's not too difficult to do. Okay, then, one of the important things we want to do with these filters is note the flow direction. Your water line is going to attach to the filter that has the flow direction towards the other filter. In other words, the inside of the filter. And if I look on this, I see the flow direction here. The big end is always the inside. You see this end has a wider cap on it. This end is totally smooth. So as a first step, we're going to put our 90-degree stem elbows in an end that is an inlet and an end that is an outlet. And these are both going to face down. So this will replicate what was here. Okay, we're now going to install the filters back in our cooler. As I said, these that we just installed, the two stem elbows, they're going to both go down. We have our inlet and our outlet to the cooler. So I'm going to install the inlet. This is the side that our water supply line will connect to onto this fitting. And this is going to be the outlet side. This fitting here will connect to the top of our float assembly and basically supply the cooler with water. The next thing I'm going to do is connect the tops of the two filters. You may see a little dripping here, but that's because these filters have been used before and they have water in them. So your filters won't be that way. Just like that. Make sure these are firmly inserted so that you'll get no leaking. I'm then going to take my water supply line and I'm going to connect it to my inlet. Now before I want to connect this second piece of tubing to the top of the water cooler, I want to flush the filters. And the reason for that is because these filters contain activated carbon. And activated carbon produces dust before it's wet. So it's important to flush the filters. And to do that, we're going to turn the water on. My assistant is helping me here. And you can see water begin to flow. And the initial water will be a little off color gray. And within a few minutes, it'll go crystal clear. And then you know you've got the filters flushed. And you're good from that point on. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to flush that water with the activated carbon dust in it into the cooler. So that's why we don't connect this tubing until after we flush the filters. Okay, if we could turn the water off now. We'll let a little bit drain. And then I'm going to connect this piece of tubing to the top of the cooler and to the float assembly, just like the one we removed. And we'll be back in business. Okay, so everything's connected now, and we want to test all the connections to make sure there are no leaks, so we can turn the water back on. We can hear the water cooler filling. Got no drips from any of our fittings, so the tubing's inserted fully, and we're done. As a last step, we're going to put our top back on. We're going to thread it up the water line. Now, I never took the water line out of the hole through the top. It's important not to, because otherwise you have to remember to re-thread it before you put this top back over it. Just pull the water line through. Really didn't take very long. Certainly once you get the hang of it, should definitely not take you more than 5 minutes.